Eric McKinney here with First and 10 and joined by USC national champion, captain, former linebacker Kevin Bruce of the 1972, 73, 74, and 75 USC Trojans. Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
My pleasure. It's great. I always love to talk about Trojan football and in these very unique time. Focusing on football is sort of a nice, cathartic, calming conversation until Notre Dame comes up. Then nothing's calm about that.
And obviously, Kevin, a familiar face to WeAreSC readers. His defensively speaking has been kind of a standard column post game for many years now, and always really grateful to hear his insights about the game. So let's jump into First and 10 here. Some kind of 10 quick questions for you about mostly about your time at USC. So you are coming to USC through the recruiting process. When did you know it? At what point did it kind of crystallize to you, I'm going to USC, that's my school?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a interesting story, at least to me and hopefully to all the WeAreSC folks as well. I was not being recruited by USC late in my senior high school year. So we had a playoff game. I went to St. Francis High School in La Cañada, Flint Ridge. And we were playing Buenaventura up in Ventura. It was the first round of playoff games for the CIF. Okay, so we went up there and played they had Buena had a high school All-American named Todd Anderson. He was a high school All-American offensive tackle and defensive tackle. And at that time, I was playing offensive tackle, fullback, defensive linebacker, defensive end, defensive tackle, and I was also the place kicker. Literally, we had like 31 guys on the team. We were playing like 5A or 4A, whatever the top thing was called. It was actually kind of funny. But anyway, and I was, and this is a shock to everybody, but I was sporting sort of a rather bad attitude with regards to playing against an All-American. I should have been the All-American, I thought to myself. I said, well, look, I'm just going to make a promise. I'm going to put this guy on the ground at the end of every play. I don't think anything bad could happen by doing that for me, probably not so good for him. Todd Anderson, remember the name, by the way. So, comes the game, and he didn't finish the game, let's put it that way. And, up in the stands was the Stanford recruiting folks. I was being heavily recruited by Stanford, and was frankly, since I'm originally from the Bay Area, and including being born in Stanford Memorial Hospital, whatever. It was likely I was going to go there and such. After that game, Coach Goo decided that they were recruiting the wrong guy. So after the game, he literally just walked up to me, son, you need to go to USC. I thought about it. I go to myself. I didn't say anything. I said, thanks, Coach. Good game, all that. So afterwards, I got the letter of intent, went down, did the visits. My dad knew Coach McKay pretty darn well, especially even when Coach was at Oregon. My dad knew him because my father played at University of Washington and later on with the 49ers. So he was sort of, dialed into the football world. So we went down and Heritage Hall was brand new at the time, which really does date me now, but whatever. And so we walked around and, talked about then I jumped on the scale and he could see how much I weighed. It was 231 pounds, and Coach McKay came running across as soon as I jumped on the scale and made note of the weight and all that. Anyway, I got the letter of intent, and I signed it, and I believe, though I can't say for certain, that I literally drove. I had to have my parents sign because I was only 17 years old, and they had to sign it. I signed it, but they had to co-sign it as well. I drove it down to campus and dropped it off just to make sure that A, it got in, and B, no one changed their mind. I was so delighted to be going to SC because I was being recruited by Notre Dame, Michigan. Harvard had an academic scholarship, the service academies, all the Pac-8 schools except for one. It was the University of Washington, which was my dad's alma mater. And I remember him being so pissed. I never heard him swear much. He was a former Marine, so, you get a little salty. but he was just ripping into the head coach at Washington. I think it was Christensen, maybe. I might be wrong on that. But anyway, whoever it was, he was just ripping them. And you know what? It turned out well. Now, my dad was not a great USC fan and never actually was, except for he promised me for 4 years he'd be a USC fan. That was it. And you know, even back in the day, and this was 70, this would have been 71 and 2, I guess. 72. There was still that long time, multi-generational hate and discontent toward SC football. So, and it's great to be part of that hate and discontent, because as long as you're giving it and not getting it, that's all right, you know. So that's a bit of a story there. That's how I ended up going to USC as a 17-year-old freshman. Later on, a bit later, Todd Anderson goes to Stanford. So my scholarship spot was taken by him, and his scholarship spot was taken by me. And then later on, of course, we do play Stanford every year. Later on, Todd Anderson was starting as the center, I think, or maybe it was guard. Can't remember which. And I was not starting as a freshman, 17-year-old freshman. And I was, again, sporting my competitive attitude, at most charitably characterized. I was frankly sporting a bad attitude. I wanted to play, right? So anyway, on punt, Stanford punt team, Todd was not the snapper, so they'd move him out to like defensive or offensive tight end type position, and they would punt. Well, guess who led the picket? Me. So guess who I was standing over? Todd Anderson. Guess what I was doing? I knew I was faster than he was. So he was big, tall, 6'6", 6'5", whatever, and lanky at, by my standards anyway. And so I would just let him kind of get ahead of me down the field as the punt was up in the air. And then I would circle back. And in those days, you could block below the waist, just couldn't block, from behind a true clipping penalty, right? I'd let him get ahead of me, a couple of yards. And I would burst, speed and get in front of him, and I'd just chop him. And I mean, this is nasty stuff. I got to say, as I look back, I go, oh, good Lord, Kevin, how could you be doing that kind of stuff? But I wanted to play. So, and Todd Anderson was playing, I wasn't. I was pissed off. So there you go. And so I kept trying. Well, I got a little dicey on one block, and it was a 15-yarder, and Coach McKay was furious at me. Now, look, so I run to the sidelines, and Coach Levy, who's the defensive coordinator, comes over to me and says, get on the bench and go at the far end and don't get close to coach. That's all he said. And I knew what he meant. He meant that my career was going to be over as a 17-year-old freshman before it even gets started if I have one more penalty. Well, regrettably, Stanford was punting a lot that day. And I had one more penalty. It wasn't me. Now, this one was not, I blocked fair and square because I was not stupid. But the guy turned right at the end, and I got a bit of the back, but it was inadvertent. And they threw the flag, and I my heart just sank. I thought, I'm done. It's over. Give it up. I'll be going to Cal Poly or Orange Coast or some San Pedro City College or whatever. And so I get to, best practice for me at that time was get to the far end of the bench, get as far away from Coach McKay as I possibly can, and pray to God that nothing bad happens. And I also remember that Coach Levy comes running down, the sidelines, in the bench area, and I was saying, he turned, he's okay, he did it okay. He was like pleading my case, and it worked out okay. So anyway, that's how I got to SC. The story of Todd Anderson. And we met for about another 2 or 3 years. And actually, it turns out I met him later in quote real life. He's a very nice fellow. I gotta tell you. I felt like, Kevin, geez, yeah, you got to get a grip here, buddy. But anyway, that was just one of those stories. But I do recall when I was beating him up yet again. They put on our punt team, which I was on. They put their killer guy right over me. And he was hitting me in the face and the face mask underneath, all that kind of stuff, things I would do. And it was payback, clearly. And the guy was actually pretty darn. He wasn't a great football player, but he was a pretty good enforcer. So I'll give him credit for that. They didn't have many of those guys. We had a lot. So there's a
So
story on that.
during your years at USC, you obviously, I mean, I mentioned the teams you played for, a lot of big games. Looking back, what was your favorite game that you played in as a Trojan?
Yeah, the obviously, clearly the favorite one game out of 4 years that was my favorite was the 74 Notre Dame game. And I can't say it was our best game, but it was clearly the most memorable, I think, to this very day. Now, look, I would say the Bush Push game, was a fun game to watch. No, really, it was tough on the heart, frankly. It was a bad coronary event waiting to happen for us guys. They take this stuff really seriously. But that 55-24 game, hanging 55 straight on Notre Dame, was cool. I just got to tell you, and it was, I can go on that game for quite some while for you. But that was my favorite. But I'll tell you, closely associated with that was the Rose Bowl game later that year. Actually, it was the following year, but it was January of the following year. Yeah, anyway. And that was just that Ohio State game was the rubber match, if you will, of 3 in a row that we played against Ohio State. First one we as a freshman. I didn't have a big hand in the victory, but I did play. I mean, a fair amount because we got ahead so quickly, or actually after the first half we got ahead. Put on some good points on Ohio State, so I got to play a lot in that game. That was great. Later on, and I remember as a freshman, I was calling the signals toward the end of the game because I was the only defensive player on the field that was a true defensive player. Everybody was playing. It didn't matter what position they were in. I had to tell them where to line up, what to do, and what not to do, and it was actually kind of funny. But which is why, frankly, Ohio State ended up getting 21 points. Other than that, they would have probably gotten maybe 14 or so. But anyway, a lot of fun. First game. But, the next year we played again, and we did not have a good day, and they did. And they had a very good day, frankly. And they ran the ball right down our throat. And that was when I was a sophomore. And I was the backup to both inside linebackers, Richard Wood and Papa Bear. So Anthony. So Charles Anthony. So we call him Papa Bear. So anyway, and Papa Bear and other situations, we did not control the center of the line of scrimmage worth a hoot, and it didn't end well. So the next year, this is now my junior season, after our 55-24 come from behind, highly unexpected and memorable game of all time. It still is, I think, the biggest comeback, certainly among ranked teams, the biggest comeback in the history of NC2A to this very day. So that game was, that Rose Bowl game was the most physical game I had ever played in my life. And it was, nobody left anything on the field. Trust me, it was 100% effort. You can't do more than 100%. It was just full out. Physical, nasty, really nasty. Very similar to just a typical Notre Dame game. That's always nasty anyway. Notre Dame talked more trash than Ohio State. Ohio State dished out a lot of hard hits. And we did, it was a close game, as you recall, 2-point conversion, 1-by-1. There's some other stories that go with that, which maybe we'll get to a bit later.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that was after the game. I had nothing left, nothing. I was exuberant and thrilled, and just totally shot. There was nothing left. I could barely walk, and but it felt good. I got to tell you what, Ohio State guys did the same thing, and they did not feel good. And I know for a fact because after the game, I actually went over to their locker room and talked to one of their players, asked them to come out. I'd never done this before or since to an opponent. and the guy comes out, and he was their offensive tackle, which was playing a lot against me, blocking against me, and the offensive guard, depending on the play in the formation. And the guy was really good. And I didn't pay attention at that time. I learned my lesson, who's an All-American, who isn't all that. I didn't pay, it was only later that I realized that this guy was a consensus first-team All-American. It was pretty good. And I just wanted to congratulate him for playing a really good game. I have never been that magnanimous after a game in my life. I don't know what got into me.
No, you're taking guys scholarships usually.
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, gosh, I got all soft and got in touch with my other side and all that, whatever. So he comes to the door, and now during that game, early on, I got cuts over both eyes. It is split wide open, and I was bleeding. Pretty soon that just stops, right? Because the compression of your helmet will stop the bleeding eventually. For those that need to know that. So I looked like a typical inside linebacker that's had a tough game, all beat up, cuts over both eyes, bruises everywhere, scratches, and this guy comes to the door, goes, "Yeah, what do you want?" And he looks at me, and I look at him. He's got cuts over both eyes, exactly the same look. It was something I never forgot. I go, wow, all right. I guess maybe I did get a couple good licks in there, during the game, and he saw the same thing. So that was and we shook hands actually. So that's without hitting each other. So, but I could tell, it's much better if you're going to put it all out there to win than it is to lose. I mean, that's true anytime, but it's really true when you put the max effort out and you end up winning by 1 point. It doesn't matter. 1 point's all you need. So.
The best player that you played with, either on defense with you or an offensive player, but during your time at USC, the player you felt like was the best alongside you?
Well, alongside me, that was easy. That's Richard Wood. Richard, it was great because he was a 3-time All-American, first-team consensus, no questions asked. Just like, yep, for sure. Yep, he's the guy. It was great for me because everybody ran toward me. They didn't want much to do with him. And that was cool. So that's why I led the team in tackles as often as I did, because he kept running toward me and I kept making the tackles. It made sense. And so Richard was, I think, the prototype of that. Maybe the term I would call it, the new prototypical inside linebacker. Taller, faster. A little not small, but the leg shape wasn't as stout as mine. I was a different type of player. I was a 6 foot plus a little bit. I rounded up to 6'1", but I was never 6'1". I was 6 foot plus a smidge. But I played at 231, 233, and then during the season you drop down. Well, Richard probably played at around 2 1/4, maybe something like that. 220-ish, right around there, but he was blazing fast. And so when I say prototypical, that's what I mean, that he was that kind of an inside linebacker, that a very strong upper body, V shape, the whole thing going on. And so he could take on those upper body types, and then he could close on a running back, receiver, whomever, in a flash. And so that was great. So if teams decided to run, it was more of a running game back when I was playing than a throwing game, typically. Not all the time, but typically. And therefore, we got a lot of reps in there. Got a lot of tackles. Got a lot of fumble causes and PBUs and fumble recovery. I always led the team in fumble recoveries because you hang around people, you tackle them, they drop the ball, you sit on it. I mean, you couldn't advance it in those days, so you just recover the ball and call it a day. Get off the field, let the offense score, or give it to the horse or something. Something like that.
How about flip side, the best player that you played against or an opponent during your time?
Yeah, that's really it's one of those really great questions, right? And from time to time, I don't think I've changed my mind. I think I've just expanded my answers a little bit on that. I'll tell you easily, the best athlete that I ever played against. Chuck Muncie at Cal. Unbelievable. This guy was almost, not quite, I think he was a 6'11" high jumper, 238 pounds, 235-ish, So big, fast, not the toughest guy in the world. This is a player that I don't know if he really liked football, but his skills were just crazy, one of those types. So, but he didn't really hurt us because it was Cal, right? But here's what I'll tell you. In my 4 years, the most successful team against USC was Cal. They only beat us once, and they did beat us. One of the few teams I'd say they beat us while I was there. Sometimes we just got on the wrong end of the score or, ran out of time, that kind of thinking. They know they beat us. We could still be playing the game. They'd still be beating us. And we had a tie game in the Coliseum the year before, which you could have ties in those days. And so we were, 2-1-1. And no other team had a record that good against us. Nobody ever beat us either beat or defeated us or tied. So I guess I would say that Chuck clearly had an attitude, but I tell you, it was Steve Roth was the quarterback my senior year, junior year too. He was, and he was extraordinary. God rest his soul. And they had Rivera, not Rivera linebacker, but a wide receiver named Rivera, same last name. And they had some really good talent. And and then I have to tell you, I think that senior year when Chuck Muncie really, I think he put a couple scores on us, and we couldn't get the ball in the dang end zone, but life depended on it. It was crazy. We couldn't throw the ball. Vince Evans was the new quarterback, and he was actually literally had run a single wing in high school offense. So sprint out was kind of our deal. But all we did was turn around. It was not a bad plan. It was, hand the ball off to Ricky Bell, and Dave Farmer would be fullback, or Moses Tutupu, or I think we had maybe one or two other fullbacks. True fullbacks. Yeah, you know what? That's not a bad offensive call. Pitch play, blast plays, some draws and cuts and those kind of things. But we just didn't have a good passing game. So anyway, we just couldn't put points up on the board because our defense at my senior year is what I'm talking about. This all started about who was the best player I played against, by the way, for those that are keeping score at home. It was Chuck Muncie, but we just couldn't put points on the board, and it just made our defense on the field had a lot of tackles as a result. But it's more satisfying to have tackles in a W than tackles and not a W, right? So Chuck Muncie. But here's the other thing. I recollected on this kind of question a fair amount. I got to tell you, Archie Griffin, because I played against him 3 times, was a pretty stout lad who was multidimensional. He could catch the football in the flat. He's very good working behind his blockers on, quick screens, setup screens, cut plays. By cut plays, I mean, it's a trap, some type of trap blocking, typically, even a cut draw. He was really dangerous. And I knew to defend him, you had to be very careful not to overrun the hole. So if the play was designed to go, off center, a blast play typically, block down, fullback, come right at the linebacker, in this case me, try to kick you out that way. But what you don't want to do is overrun the center line in pursuit while shedding the blocker, who's one of the famous Ohio State, as Pete Johnson, frankly, fullbacks, and which was a tough order. So, but what I made sure, as soon as I hit the center line, I would start to break down and get small, get low, and force the blocker to have to stand up some. And by doing that, I had a much better vision of Archie Griffin because he was short. I wasn't the tallest guy in the field either, but he was actually shorter than I was. And I could get a good view of him and put a tackle on him. But I will tell you, I put a fair amount of tackles on the guy, but there was a few that I just slid right off. I mean, it was like, you don't grab a guy like that. You got to really, put a full good technique, full on tackle, or he'll go right through you. And I had a couple that day, and I've watched the film a few times, and I tell you, that's one of those games I'd love to play it over. I'd love to play any game over, to tell you the truth. That's a different matter. But I'd love to get back some of the mistakes I made. I made a few. I had a good one. I did strip Archie of the football. He fumbled. We recovered it. So that was a positive play. And I'd just come off the flu. I'd lost like 18 pounds in the course of 2 weeks. I didn't practice, but the first practice and the day before the game, that was it. So I was a little on the weakish side anyway. No excuse. You still got to make the tackle and do the job. So, but anyway, I add Archie into the best guys I've ever played against. And I tell you, that's pretty good company. Chuck Muncie athletically was probably one of the best. Probably better than any athlete I ever played against. And Archie was probably the most, I would use the term efficient. And if you make a mistake, you're going to pay. You got to just be on your game. And he had a pretty good blocking crowd as well. So Ohio State was a good football team, well coached. They played tough defense, tough offense. Special teams were good. And I look back on that that Rose Bowl game, and my gosh, we had 4 turnovers. You realize that? 4 turnovers. And then we had the incredible whiffed punt that Jim Lucas turned into a first down. I don't know if you guys remember that one, but oh my gracious, that was hilarious. I might get to that later. But those kind of plays. But we had 4 turnovers. And then we took points off the board and ended up getting no points right before the half. I mean, McKay was a gutsy coach. He went to a bowl game. He wasn't going to let anything get in the way of calling a gutsy game. Let's go for it. We're not here to tie or, look good. We're here to win. And so we had turnovers. We had interceptions. We had fumbles on offense. But on defense, we were doing the same thing. We ended up with getting 4 turnovers. Or maybe 3 or 4. I can't remember. So.
You've kind of given a few of these already, but curious, what's kind of maybe your favorite sort of behind the scenes story of your career at USC? Something, in a practice or during a game, just something that maybe media or fans didn't really get a full sense of an event while you're there.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah. And the caveat is it has to be suitable for family.
Sure, that'd be the preference. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be the preference. Good point. So let me tell you about a party. This was after the Notre Dame game, 55-24 LA. My girlfriend at the time, who has been now my bride for 42 plus years, Patty, was friends with a Notre Dame student. And she had come out to watch the game in LA and so forth. So, well, they had planned this after game party at her apartment, my now wife, the then girlfriend's apartment in Pasadena, where she lived. And so I expect, the USC guys are going to show up, my buddies and guys on the team, and, who's going to say no to a party? I was like, come on. Especially in that type of environment, a lot of fun, everybody, limping around pretty good, but, it felt good. The pain is a lot better after a game like that, trust me. So, but what I didn't realize is that Patty's girlfriend from Notre Dame had invited a bunch of Notre Dame guys to come to the same party. So here we go. I get to Patty's apartment. You get showered and clean up best you can, and you're all banged up and you got tape, stuff. Anyway, you look like you've been mugged, and frankly you have been. It was Notre Dame. That's always a mugging anyway. I don't care if they're good or bad. It's a mugging. So I get to her apartment with some other friends that came with me, and open the door, go in, and here's all these Notre Dame guys, because they'd come up earlier. I guess they showered more quickly to get the heck out of there because they didn't want to hear Parsegian talk anymore, I guess. And they're in there and they're drinking beer, and I'm going, You're drinking my beer. I mean, come on, So, but there was plenty to go around. It's we were hydrating with the carbonated beverages there. So, and after a while, we just start talking football, with the Notre Dame guys or whoever else would listen to you, but a lot with the Notre Dame guys. And so I remember getting into a corner. We're sitting kind of in this little kitchenette area, because it's a college apartment. It's not real big. So people are overflowing all over the place. And the building, no, they didn't throw us out. So I probably didn't want to, as I think about it. Because we're talking 50 plus people, easy. And, peaks and valleys on the queuing function of the participation. But there was a lot of people there having a great time, by the way. Notre Dame guys were a little subdued, but, they were kind of got, a couple of brewskis, hydrate, and it's okay, because they're going to go to Disneyland the next day or whatever the deal was. So I started talking to these guys, and here's what we knew. We knew we didn't much care for each other as a team. No, we hated each other as a team. Let's just be clear. I mean, there's just done. That's the way it is. And if you don't have that attitude, you don't understand the rivalry. Okay. But that said, after the game, look, it's just, one-on-one, people-on-people kind of deal, and that's cool. So we start talking about it. Well, how did you guys do this? How'd you do that? I mean, no one's giving away the secret sauce. It's on film anyway. I mean, don't worry about it. And they said a couple things. One was the story about, people ask, what did Coach McKay say in the locker room in halftime? That's a common question, right? Well, what's more important is what happened in the Notre Dame's locker room. Here's what I found out is that Marcijan was berating, because we could hear him yelling. He was berating them about, we're getting ahead of these guys. We're not going to let these SOBs, not the term he used, off the ground. And don't let that little SOB take that kickoff and do anything with it, period. And if you do, I'm going to kick your butts, asses, whatever. I mean, football talk. Locker room type talk. So what he had done is he had set up a situation where he was inspiring his team to get downfield and, put a hurt on Anthony Davis to start the second half. Okay, here's the problem. On the other locker room, ours, we're not getting our asses chewed. It's like we're watching the film of the first quarter. We made a couple minor adjustments. I had to plead with Coach Lindsay and Coach Levy we had to back our linebacker. As the inside linebackers, they had us up too close to the line of scrimmage. The purpose was to follow the pulling guard, because they pulled the guard almost every play in some way, shape, or form. And we were getting cut off a lot. And so you'll notice maybe in the second half, you might notice that I'm back off the ball about 2.5, 3 yards, which is still too close in my view. But in the first half is 1.5 to 2 yards, almost on the line of scrimmage, very close. So we made that adjustment. We made an adjustment in the secondary, and then we made a change in our planning to make sure that we don't let the slot back or typically the slot back, but occasionally the motion guy who comes around the tight end side. Don't let him off the line of scrimmage free. Put a hit on him, slow him down, take him off stride, which is, I'm good on that. That's great. You get a free look at, some wide receiver. I'm good on that. Do that all day long. So we made a couple little tweaks, and then Coach McKay told us, says, look, guys, gentlemen, you're embarrassing yourselves. We're better than this. You're better than this. There's no law against blocking and tackling and running the football. So let's go out and do those things. Let's go out and do that. And there was some other stuff that was said that I can't recall. But that was it. There was no fire-breathing dragon. There was no. We knew what was going on. We had more people watching that game than any event, that year for sure, if not more than that. And we knew we were better than that. But we also knew that we, frankly, stunk the place up. We made some adjustments. We made some adjustments on offense too, subtle ones. I don't know if they ever really went into effect because of the way the second half unfolded. So here's what happens. They kick off, AD gets the ball, and then if you look at the wedge that that he was running behind, think about this for just a minute. You got Ricky Bell, you got Dave Farmer, the most underrated fullback in the history of USC, in my view. Fantastic football player. Mosi Tutupu. I'm missing somebody. Another All-American, just my point. And that was the wedge, right? And AD, he could run the football. He kills Notre Dame. He owned them, just owned them. And boom, 102 yards, 103, whatever it was, gone. Oh, Mario Salado was on that wedge too. And he did a good thing by not getting downfield and not doing anything blocking-wise, like I would have done against Todd Anderson. Don't do that, right, on that. So boom, in the end zone. That, according to the Notre Dame guys, crushed them in the sidelines. Because Parsegian set it up where don't let that SOB, full term, right? Don't let that SOB, take the ball and basically, run it in and do that. It's exactly what happened. Then when we kicked the ball off, Dave Lewis hits, I think it was McLean, their returner, in a way I've never seen before or since. How he hung on to the football, I have to give him credit. Dave Lewis was another prototypical defensive end / outside linebacker. Tall, bigger, and fast. And he put, God rest his soul, he put a lick on this guy. It was just part of that whole second half that we owned Notre Dame. And we were making a statement, we own you. And we didn't own them in the first half. I think they pretty fairly kicked our butts. But we were not going that direction anymore. And so that was one of those stories about after all that took place, a party in Pasadena. We had a discussion. We found out more about what really happened. But here's what's more important. That's when we cut a deal. And the deal was, for some reason, Notre Dame hates Ohio State. I don't know why. They hate a lot of teams, I think. So the deal was, since we were going to be playing Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, that was already known, and they were going to play the last undefeated team eligible to play in a postseason game, that was Alabama in the Orange Bowl. So the deal was this: you guys beat Ohio State, we're going to beat Alabama. What we knew is if we do that, that's a national championship. So that was the, air quotes, deal that we kind of cut. And back in that day, those days, I guess. Gosh, I sound like an old guy, but anyway, maybe I am. But regardless, the Orange Bowl was always a night game, and it was the last game of New Year's Day, typically. Sometimes it's the day after, not a Sunday. And guess what happened? We beat Ohio State by 1. Very entertaining game. It wasn't a pretty game, but it was an entertaining game. Physical and all that. Notre Dame takes out Alabama. That leaves Oklahoma as the only undefeated team in the country. But guess what? They're on probation again. And they're not eligible to play. And national championship. That's number 2. My second national championship in 3 years, which is extraordinary and incredible. But to some thinking, including mine, some of that got started to finish the season in a little party in Pasadena, California.
You mentioned Rose Bowl is obviously going out to South Bend for Notre Dame. What was your favorite venue, not the Coliseum, your favorite road or neutral site venue to play in?
Yeah, I guess I did have to disqualify the Rose Bowl because that was my favorite, of course. It's not a home game. The pageantry was extraordinary. The Pasadena Arroyo Seco weather was always awesome. It was just, and I've been going to since I grew up in that Lucky Island, Flint Ridge area. I've been to the Rose Bowl, and then we actually played Pasadena High School in the Rose Bowl a couple of times when I was in high school. So I was, pretty familiar with it. But that aside, the other most favorite place to play, Notre Dame. Favorite isn't exactly the right word. The most
Sure.
memorable, right? Because it can be intimidating if you let it to play there. And you have to zero in and focus on the task at hand. You got to ignore the fans. Frankly, you got to ignore the team, Notre Dame, in terms of, because they talk more trash than any 10 teams, on a long day. Hang on one second. As a freshman, and we went back and played him in South Bend. Coach had a superstition and a practical reason, but he never had the team stay in South Bend. We stayed in Elkhart, Indiana, at some Holiday Inn or some trashy joint. It was really bad, but the fans could be controlled because they would be up all night playing the band and tuba players and throwing stuff and talking smack and all that. So on that game in South Bend as a freshman, I may have just turned 18. I'm not sure. So this is sort of one of those. I was 18. So you can tell there's a lot of younger points of view that over the decades have marinated, shall we say, and matured. But as we came, people might be familiar with the Notre Dame deal. They have the small tunnel, and then everybody smacks the thing over the sign over the. We don't, but they like that. I think they have some players that have to hoist them up there to get to the top. They don't have the hang time, I guess. I don't know, whatever. But anyway, I can't help it. I have to say stuff like that. But as we're coming through the tunnel, they went first. Yeah, they went first, and coach was mad. The referees kept coming and said, "You got to get on the field. We'll give you a penalty." He says, "You got to get those guys off in the field. They're in the way. I'm not going to have my guys in the tunnel." Because there was a fight every year in the LA tunnel. I mean, it was just, this is what's going to happen. And coach knew it. And he just didn't want that in that really small, narrow area. So they went out first. They clear the deck. So then he said, "All right, let's go." So we start going out. And he says, "Everybody you have to put your helmets on, chin straps, because people are going to throw stuff, bottles, whatever is handy, and whatever." So you do all that anyway. Pretty much everywhere we went, it was kind of like that, to tell you the truth. But for sure there. So put that on. Coming through the tunnel, and it's all crowded. You're scrunched in there trying to kind of get through. And I was pushed up against the masonry side. Some guy leans over from quite a distance up, probably, 15, 20, at least 15, maybe 20 feet up. And I look up. That was a mistake. Look up, and I could tell it was an older guy, and he's drunk, just talking some garbly stuff. I don't know what he was saying. And then he launches. He throws up all over my right shoulder pad, down the side. I mean, and I smelled like a pint of bourbon the whole first half until, we dunked a bunch of water on it, got all the debris off, shall we say. But I was just soaked with this yuck. And I did get a chance to change I can't change my shoulder pads because we didn't have an extra, and these are all custom fitted, right? So, I got this stanky shoulder pad, and I got a new jersey on at halftime, and changed my undershirt as well and all that. And that was like, welcome aboard to South Bend, Indiana, right? And regrettably, we didn't win that day either. So kind of sucked. It was a bad day. That was the Eric Penick 82-yard run. That's the only time that, other than in a Rose Bowl, that I've noticed a crowd, because they went crazy on that one. I could tell you what happened on that play, but it just set up the next game in the Coliseum even more so. And then ultimately in my senior year, we went back to South Bend, and I had promised the defense that, guys, we're gonna play lights out. And we ended up holding them to 17 points, and Joe Montana is at quarterback, very, very good, but we were able to control him, and I did blow him up a couple of times on the sideline in particular on some scrambles. So I do remember that. That was kind of cool. So anyway, South Bend, it's an event, it's an experience. It's one of those, if you can go. My senior year, now my fiance and the same Notre Dame friend, they sneak us out of the hotel which was not in Elkhart now. We were in a different dive somewhere else, but still not in South Bend. They sneak us and probably 8 or 10 other guys in 2 cars. I remember the tires were like, 2 inches off the ground. They're all flat. They took us on Friday early evening to the campus rally. And so we're trying to be incognito in these SC Blazers, USC. It's kind of funny. And it was a blast. I mean, those guys are having a really good time. And B, they're talking smack about USC and blah, 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 blah. And the year before in LA, and then we're going to get them back. Blah, 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 blah. It was a lot of fun. And there was no, rock throwing, and people recognized us a little bit, and they were cool about it. I was like, all right, a few guys. And so it was a good, fun adventure. I recommend USC people go to the rally. It's well, don't get in a fight, but go to the rally. And it was a blast. So, and it was, again, more fun to actually win the game, get on the plane and go back home. That's a long flight to lose, and it's a much better flight back when you win.
Sure. Now, you've mentioned a lot of guys that you played with. If there's one guy, a USC player that you didn't get to play with, and this can be on defense with you or an offensive player too, who's the one guy kind of throughout USC history that you wish you could have had on one of your teams?
Yeah, wow. Man, there are so many, as you rightly know, that would be fun. Tell you what, yeah, here's what I think. I'd like to play with anybody that played Texas in the Rose Bowl, because I'm going to take care of Vince Young. Pure and simple. You ain't getting in the end zone on that last play. So I don't care who it is. Just put me on the field. And I'm not saying that as an arrogant guy, because he had a career day, literally, as it turns out. Heck of an athlete, all the above, but our defense was depleted, as you could just see it, and not in great position oftentimes because we had too many young guys that didn't quite fully understand all the nuances. Well, that's when a senior inside linebacker who can get to the ball can make a difference. So without being arrogant, I don't want to do that, but put me on the field.
Now, yeah, I think people would appreciate that. I think people would have appreciated a healthy veteran linebacker in that game. Certainly, like you said, a lot of youth out there. You've talked about a lot of kind of really interesting and memorable moments. When you think back on your time, what's your favorite one? I guess maybe the one that comes to you first, and kind of is the most, I guess, crystallized in your mind about a memory of your time at USC.
Yeah, wow. To boil it down to one is probably not really possible, but I can say that from a memorable perspective, walking off the field, Rose Bowl against Ohio State, as I said, there was nothing left, knowing what we had pulled off and accomplished, not knowing that we won the national championship. Notre Dame hadn't even played then. I think it had kicked off at that point. Was just, as you can tell, is memorable. And it was memorable for me for different kinds of reasons. Once I was physically, banged up pretty good. Had been sick, really sick. And yet out of all of that, there was this close, hard-fought victory, right? And people were just going crazy about it. Frankly, as much as the part was the USC side anyway, as the Notre Dame game in LA, where people actually stood up for an entire half. And while there's many things about that game that are very memorable, of course, for some reason, I just have to tell you, it all came together against Ohio State in that game. And as a result, there's pieces of it that are just highly memorable, but what's crystal clear, to answer your question straightforwardly, was coming off the field. And working our way slowly, but working our way up the tunnel. That was just like, we did it. We did it. And that was great because the way that season started was not auspicious.
Now, we've talked a lot about kind of your successes on the field. Can you take us through a little bit of your path off the field once football ended for you? I mean, a postgraduate scholarship awarded, and obviously academics very important to you kind of before USC, during USC, and after as well. What was your path a little bit after football?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, you're right. I did win the NCAA took a postgraduate scholarship, and I had to make a decision because I had a contract to play with Oakland. That's when Oakland was in Oakland for real, and it was either or utilize a scholarship. The money really for in those days, and I was not going to be a first round guy, so I was going to be a day two kind of guy, or not at all, which is actually better financially, and just to be undrafted free agent. So anyway, I had a contract with Oakland to play, and it was $32,000 on the annual, and there was incentive monies, and that if I got like rookie of the year and a bunch of other crazy stuff, which would never happen for all kinds of reasons, I would have monies of $100,000. Ooh. So this is 76, so I mean there's a bit of an inflationary factor, but still that's not just over the top money as you see today, just the way things are. Or a scholarship, and I knew, and I'd always wanted and knew I needed to complete my education more fully in an advanced degree. So that was my decision, and so I did get my MBA from USC as well, and then moved on into corporate America, and that was really there's three parts to my career. One is the corporate move. So I started off like many people, entry level position and so forth, and then in the healthcare company, which is a predecessor company to what is now Cardinal Healthcare. Then I was recruited by PepsiCo, and I worked for PepsiCo as an executive for about 10 years. Moved a bunch. That was one of the things you had to, in those days, moving to where your job was located was a big deal, even though we all traveled a lot too. That was the thing. So we moved a lot. And so I worked 10 years with PepsiCo, and then I moved into my theory was to always work for in the corporate arena anyway. The best and biggest, if you could get both, that's great. And so I became president of Pulte Corporation in a functional area, manufacturing and distribution supply. I was also CEO of 5 different wholly owned subsidiaries. So that's when I started to move into that CEO role. I did that for about 4 years, maybe a bit more. And then said, I think what I'd really like to do is be CEO of some companies that require turnaround work, and really, swing for the fences. So that's really what I did. I did have spent some time with LSG Lufthansa Sky Chefs, which is an airline catering when they put food on airplanes, which is helpful when you're in the catering business at that time. We ended up selling that company, and that was an interesting transaction learning that went on. So I did a lot of it. As a result of that, plus some other work, I got familiar with the merger and acquisition world as well as being CEO. Then I became CEO of a number of different companies and would move them, grow them, typically. Not always. There's been some hard knocks there too. Not everything just goes in this perfect direction. There's adversities that you face, and how you react to that is always fascinating. Clearly, that teamwork and working together on a common purpose with a common goal, with the outcome of a success, are learnings that started, really young age, not even teen, even before that, I think. And then served me, and I'd say would serve others very well throughout their career, whatever that might be. So anyway, I became CEO, and I call it the last third or so of my career, of a number of different companies, sold most of them. And I'm now in kind of, I would say the last bit of my career is as a turnaround CEO, typically, or chief restructuring officer, CRO, for companies through a consulting firm that I'm pleased to be part of, a great team. So it's not a commercial, so I'm not going to give you the name, but it is what we do. We take troubled, distressed companies, and we do everything we can to right the ship, fix them, and put them on the right path. We don't go in and do a chainsaw Al hack job. That's nonsense. That's just crazy. That's bad business, frankly. What we try to do is grow the companies, keep them solvent, create a growth environment so that it's better for everybody, all stakeholders, employees, vendors, lenders, equity holders, all the above. A win in a situation if we can pull that off. And sometimes it all comes together, and it's a great feeling, much like coming off the field against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. The same feeling when we really have a good turnaround that meets the situation where equity holders are satisfied, management's satisfied, lenders are satisfied and paid off, frankly. Vendors too. They're if it's a bankruptcy, a Chapter 11, then it's they're all deemed critical vendors and paid 100 cents on the dollar. So no one's sitting there holding the bag, right? And that has happened a few times. Then there's others that aren't fully that 100% type of outcome that I just described, but it's still a good outcome. And having people that can stay employed, do their job. Sometimes you have to kind of retool the team and do some recruiting and get some faster and bigger players, as it were. But that too is a good feeling to set these matters into a good direction. So that's what I do now, and I do enjoy it. I was explaining this to somebody the other day. I go, look, trust me, this is full body contact business. I mean, it's high intensity. These are distress situations. Cash is hard to find. And there's obviously, they're not calling us because things are great. They're calling us because things are just definitely not great. So be prepared to put in a good 12-hour day as routine, and generally 6 to 7 days a week for the first 3 months. It's that intense. But I love that kind of stuff. So it's like, strap on your helmet. We're going to run on the field against Notre Dame. The guy's going to throw up on you. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
The last of your 10 to start off here. What piece of advice would you give to either current or future USC student athletes for their time there at USC and beyond as well?
Yeah, and that is clearly, well, I didn't say it, so maybe it isn't clearly. But one of the things that was attractive to me about USC was the business school, right? Clearly the football program is, I was going to say without peer, but we're in a transition stage right now. This has been going on for too dang long, but that's a different story. But the networking, and I've not lived in Southern California since '93. So, but the network is still very strong throughout the world. I've done a lot of work outside the country, and the USC network is strong, and it's part of that benefit of the USC degree is the automatic networking and bonding that can take place, right? And therefore, for a student athlete, I would heartily recommend that you've got to be a student athlete. You can't be just an athlete. That's not enough. Take advantage of the student part of student athlete. And to get the degree. And we've done a really good job as a team, as a program, I should say, with the graduation rate. It's really very exemplary, and it's one of the best in the country in that regard. So I think we do a really good job on the student side of student athlete. I think there's some work would left to chop on the athletic side of it when it comes to winning football games, but that's a different conversation.
One of the things I wanted to jump back to, and you mentioned talking about it later, that 74 Notre Dame game, I know you've hit on a lot of different aspects of it. I'm curious, you guys on the sideline, when was it? When was it that you knew that this is done? We are running away with this thing?
It's a great question, and I'll tell you that first of all, and I've written about this in WeAreSC.com, but Mike Garrett was running up and down the sidelines in the first half when we're down, 17-0, 24-0. And saying, we're going to win this game. Keep your head up. You're going to win this game. And I remember that. And I remember looking up and watching and just thinking to myself, well, first of all, that's the right attitude. I'm struggling to get there, but that's the right attitude, And so that was first half. The setup for the rest of the game, I think, is really kind of baked into that, Eric, to tell you the truth. And that's what makes that so memorable to me in that regard. So, as I look back on that particular experience, I don't want to get too profound on the thing. I mean, it's a football game, and we sucked in the first half. I have to tell you, and we got our act together, and things flipped around, and it became quite a comeback story for any school, let alone ranked teams. I think we were, I don't know if we were 5th or 6th or something. They were number 2 or 3. Depends on the poll, I guess. But to have that type of you're here and you're there, it just doesn't happen. And to see that and to have participated in it and to have a hand in it with a number of critical turnover plays was extraordinary. It really was. And I was blessed to be part of that. And there's only a handful of guys that can say that, right? So the first half on the bench or the sidelines, I hated sitting down on the bench, but sometimes you just have to, But except when I clipped somebody on the Stanford punt return team, and I got to hide from Coach McKay. But anyway, that aside, in the first half, it was try to keep your head up, try to get the attitude, try to embrace what Garrett was saying. For me, can't speak for other guys, but that was really very much the first half. Second half, and when did we know? I can tell you exactly when I knew. Once we scored and we got ahead, it was 26 or 27. It was the touchdown that we couldn't get the 2-point conversion. I remember it that way. Can't remember the score. I wasn't looking at the scoreboard, I got to tell you. But once we got ahead, that was it. Yeah, I knew we had them because we weren't going to let them score. Which, by the way, we did. For the record, we did shut them out in the second half. Just in case anybody forgot, I didn't. But that's when I knew. Other people have a different, perspective, possibly. Maybe when Nady put in the end zone, we knew we had them. No, I didn't know we had them. I knew we had a lot of wood left to chop, but I knew we were fired up and we were ready to play. And we had made some good adjustments, good, sound halftime adjustments, which I don't think I see enough of that in the college game. And frankly, with specifically the USC halftime adjustments, different topic. But I knew once we got ahead by just a couple points, whatever it was, I said, we got him. we got our foot on the back of their neck, and they're not going to get up. We're not going to let them get up. And we roughed them up pretty good.
Now, you're the 74 team. Obviously, you're a junior then, so more involved, in terms of reliance on you and activity and all that than the 72 team when you're a freshman kid. But
Sure.
and obviously in 74, those two games, like you mentioned, the Rose Bowl game and the Notre Dame game, they stand out. But I just want to kind of open the floor for you about that 72 team. The guys you played with, the kind of team. I mean, this is a team that is consistently mentioned as, one of the great, not just USC teams, but one of the great teams all time. Your memories from that team and that season, and I guess when, you realized, again, another kind of realization thing, but when you knew, hey, this is a great team. This is kind of an all-time team.
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. When I showed up for practice 2-a-days in 1972, as I think I mentioned earlier, I was a 17-year-old naive, I didn't say that, but I was naive freshman who played a physical brand of football. So, okay. So I come in and I was a linebacker. They were going to try me a little bit at nose tackle. That didn't last but 2 days. Back to linebacker, inside linebacker. And on day 3, they put on these aprons. They still wear something like those today, but they're aprons, kind of like a catcher's apron or whatever, but all the way down your legs, right? So the idea was to, since you're now the blocking dummy, but you actually are alive and move, and the first team, the 1s and 2s, are just going to basically pound the bejeebers out of you. So on day 3, that's what's happening. So I line up, and they say, "Hey, Bruce, get over here. You're going to play Mike backer, right?" So I played both Mike, strong middle, strong side inside, and also I played, and you had to play both inside positions. You played the weak side, which we called Wanda. So we had female names for the talk about not PC now, but we had female names for the weak side and male names for the strong side. So bunch of football players were not real bright, but we can keep that one in our heads. So, and that was the Wanda anyway, little known fact. So anyway, I line up as a Mike, and he says, "Give us a good look, give us a good look," So the very first practice play that came at me was 23 blast with Sam Cunningham at fullback and Anthony Davis at tailback, and I didn't give any ground on that one. So, I gave him a good look. Let's put it that way. But I had no idea, thinking about it. It's only with the perspective of looking back and understanding that 2 consensus All-Americans, 2 of the most gifted football players you ever want to run into. And I'm practicing against these guys. And as it turns out, I'm practicing against these guys every day. And you hear about, good practices, and when the ones are giving them a good look and all that really makes you a better football player. It does, as long as you can physically survive, and I mean that literally. I mean, it's tough, but that's allows you play better if you practice better. There's nothing profound about what I just said, but if you want to play tough, you practice tough. And I think there's areas where, pushing that button a little harder would make a lot of advantages. So the 72 team was extraordinary because 3 deep, 4 deep walk-ons, everybody was good. Everybody. Some were great. Everybody want to play. Everybody can't play. So the competition was crazy intense without hurting each other. There were some lines of demarcation, like, nothing below the waist, kind of, for the other than, when you're doing a full 7-on-7 and a full 11-on-11, 1s and 2s and 2s and 3s and all that. And the 1s and 3s, and that's where I came in, because as a 17-year-old freshman, I was a third string in terms of the lineup. So, that's not counting special teams, where I played a lot of special teams, which is great because we had a lot of kickoff returns. We kept scoring points. Didn't punt a heck of a lot. but anyway, you knew how good this team was. And look, we had a lot of fifth-year seniors on the offensive line, on defensive line too, but more on the offensive line. And they're looking at guys like me, like, you know, a fuzzy face, you know, who do you think you are? And they're just going to rip into you. And that's good training, you know. And then you, for me, being on the sideline more than I would have liked during game time, but, you know, it is what it is. At that time, I could watch, and I would focus in on the defense, frankly, not so much the offense, but I would watch the offense too, from almost like a spectator perspective, because I knew what was going on. And you could see just how talented everybody was, but you saw how good the blocking was. It was unbelievable. And that was not the only unbelievable. Then you watch the defense, and it just would overwhelm people. And this is where Richard Wood really made things so much different, because he was so fast, physical. Others liked him, Jimmy Sims, other guys that were just blazing speed, good size, strength. Secondary, T. Parker, you know, think about that, T. Parker. I mean, Charlie Phillips was like, you know, barely could get on the field. Charlie is probably one of the greatest safeties we ever had. You know, it just was, T was like, as far as I know, still leads the team in interceptions, record of interceptions. And then you look at some of the skill players. Swan, who definitely was, his higher calling was playing football for USC. Let's just put it that way. And maybe Pittsburgh too. Okay, enough said on that one. But with regards to a 1972 team, it was, you know, it was a difference maker in many respects. And then you had a tough fifth-year senior, Mike Ray, a lot of sprint out. This guy was an incredible athlete. He was a scratch golfer, right-handed. He could shoot a 7-8 handicap left hand. One of those kind of guys. You know, he was a place kicker. I mean, really, you know, just the expectations from a coaching staff, which is also an extraordinary group, many of which went to the NFL as position coaches, but many also as head coaches. Just fascinating if you kind of do the backtrack on that. So the bar was set high. The bar was overachieved significantly. And to your point, Eric, it's considered one of the best teams, period. You know, you start to hear about, well, you know, this era, that era. Yeah, okay, I get it. And it's a different type of game today than then. It was a different type of game then than before that, too, you know, mostly because of rules changes, by the way. But that team was incredible. Well, it set the standard for what was expected of all of us every day, both on the field, practice, on the field, game day. And there's no substitute for that. Winning begets winning. And that 72 team really set the bar. That was my first USC team that I played on. So it's it defined for me what's acceptable. And by definition, that helps define what's not acceptable.
You mentioned kind of changing eras and that, and now when you know, still actively engage watching football and clearly enjoy breaking it down and what you do for the site, your take kind of on I guess linebacker play throughout college football now. I mean, obviously because the offenses have adapted so much, it makes the defense adapt as well. But I'm just kind of curious, again, kind of another sort of open-ended question just to throw at you. Your take overall on kind of linebacker play in college, what's expected of them, how they're performing, and kind of the way the position has either changed or not changed since you manned that spot, you know, years ago.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's changed in many respects. And it's driven by rules changes. And I tell you there's a few very significant rules changes, one of which is offensive holding, 10 yards, point of foul. I think it's point of foul, right? No, it's line of scrimmage. I think it might be line of scrimmage. You know, I can't remember. But the point is, when I was playing, it was 15 yards. And from point of foul. So a holding call on the offense on a pass play in the pocket, 7 yards deep, is a 22-yard penalty. It's a drive killer, right? So that rule has been changed, so it's not nearly as devastating to have a holding call one. That even assumes that they call it on somebody other than us, right? Yeah, you know what I mean. The other piece that goes with that is that holding is legal in certain situations, hands inside, all that. Well, that's holding. I'm sorry, I don't know how fine you want to slice that one, but it's like holding is holding, guys. I mean, gee whiz. So it causes then the not just linebacker play, but we'll focus on linebacker. It causes linebacker play to be different. The other, I think, more meaningful rules change that has caused different look on the defense and different techniques in certain situations is the illegal receiver downfield rule, which in college is 3 yards downfield is okay, and anything beyond that is not okay if the ball is thrown, right? Well, I got to tell you what, as a linebacker, that's brutal because you've got, these big hosses in front of you, and they're coming at you, and you don't know if it's run pass. You really don't know. So you on the one hand, you've got to hold your ground. On the other hand, you can't get caught too far in the box on a pass play that's coming behind you on some, delay pattern, crossing pattern, a hook, any of those kinds of slants, a lot of slants. That people go, why is that guy so wide open? Well, I'm telling you, he's wide open because you got a 3 yard penalty right there. And so that has made a big difference. So now that's why you see, instead of my typical alignment when I was playing, would have been about 3.5 to maybe, I hate to cut it too fine, but it wouldn't be 4 yards. It may be a bit more than 3.5, right? So somewhere in between would be a typical alignment. Now that's crowding line of scrimmage. These guys are off the ball 5 yards, sometimes 6, right? A normal setup, because they have to give away that 3 yards. And so that's now one of the reasons that you have to find defenses that it's very difficult to be successful with a read and react defense. You have to attack. You don't attack, you're going to get caught. Not so much flat-footed, though. Sometimes the techniques are such that it looks that way, right? But what you do have is you're catching. You're not attacking. You're not punishing. Therefore, one of the ways to get around that is to have a lot of slants and stunts and movement and different kinds of situations. Really put the defense in a better position to be successful. The problem with that is those are risky. So for every scheme and blitz or slant, and slants are less risky, but just slanting the line is less risky than a blitz play, because the blitz play by definition means there's going to be something open as a result. There's a weakness somewhere designed in that blitz. We know there's a weakness, and good defensive players have been coached to know what those weaknesses are, so they'll react back to them as quickly as possible if something doesn't go right. If the point of attack on the defense is such that there's no attack, you've got to get to the point of weakness. And should be processed mentally in fractions of seconds. It's not like you see this guy, he's overthinking his position. Yeah, he probably is. And that's a problem. You want a reaction that's the correct reaction. And that's good coaching and good learning, and the ability to transfer from the film room to the practice field to the game field and make it work on game day, then that could be successful. But it's the linebacker play in that respect has changed. What has not changed are the physical techniques, how to tackle properly, how to take on if someone's running some type of blast play, right? So blocking down, double team, it won't be a fullback now. It'll be a motion man or a tight end or something like that typically, or it can be sometimes a running back, trying to block you. You don't wait now 5 yards deep for the blocker to come to you. You attack the blocker in the line of scrimmage. I can't tell you how many times I see linebackers not do that. So by not attacking the blocker, they're caught downfield a little too far, creates lanes that you can break off, right? it cuts off your offside pursuit, if you will, your help that's coming to you. And it makes for, frankly, it makes for a long dang day on defense if you don't, technique-wise, just take care of that. The other, I think, fundamental that is just not done well for the most part, other than the very successful schools, is tackling. I've seen some of the worst tackling. I mean, it's flag football. I mean, it just drives me nuts. And even good teams have very poor tackling until later in the season. They tend to get better. And you got to start the season with good tackling. I mean, and that's it's not that it can't be taught. It is taught. It's just it has to be reinforced. And good tackling means, eyes open, focus on the midsection, because that's where the player's going to go. I don't care where the legs are going. I just, watch the belt buckle, and that's where he's going, right? Keep your eyes open and tackle through with your eyes open. It's called exploding your eyes. You got to explode your eyes open when you make the tackle. Hands come through. Use your fingers. These are the most underrated elements of a good tackle is your fingers. That means just hang on. If you're the first contact person, get your hands on them. Don't worry about the highlight reel. Forget it. Make the tackle, get your hands on them, and let your buddies come in and clean it up. And then that's how you get a lot of fumbles too, by the way. The other thing I notice guys play standing up too much. You got to get down a little bit. Got to get down. And watch the balls at their feet. If their heels are up, I like that, because their weight is better distributed. Their weight is now on the front of their feet. Hopefully they got the proper leverage, and their butts are in their proper positions, all that. But that tells you that they're ready to move. When guys have their feet flat on the ground, I see this a lot. It drives me crazy, I have to tell you. It just drives me nuts. You have to unload your weight before you can move. And that takes about not a quarter of a second, less than that, a fraction of a second, still a fraction of a second. And then you might have to cross over. And as soon as you cross over, now you have lost a half a step. Little things, technique things, that when teams are well coached, you can take a 3-star and he'll play like a 5-star or a 4-star if you allow them good technique, help them understand the game. They have good football IQ. They've got good technique. They got a big streak of tough and mean in them, and they love playing football. And you know what? You can do a lot with that versus a 5-star that really can't easily pass a mirror without looking at themselves, right? And look, there's some guys that are like that are actually very darn good. And okay, fine. They're a rare exception, in my view. And so that's some of the things that I look for in linebacker. The other elements I tell you is the pass, dropping to their pass zone if they're in zone, which you see a little bit more linebacker on man-to-man cover. But let's face it, if you put a linebacker, inside linebacker, outside linebacker, different story. Inside linebacker, you put them into a man cover situation. It's just that's your weak point by definition, right? That's just not a good thing, right? It's not what they're good at, and it's a physical mismatch. Whether it's a tight end, it's probably the closest good match that you have, but you're in there, you've got an alignment problem because you're inside the tight end typically. And so you're giving away the seam. You're giving away a few yards to probably a pretty gifted athlete, right? But the pass drop, when you watch guys dropping back into a pass zone, watch their feet. And watch, do they stay on the balls of their feet, or are they, clip, clop, putting full weight on the back of their full, on the heel, and because that's slow. I don't know how to explain it, but it just, that slows you down by doing that. You got to stay on the balls of your feet and move fast. I'll tell you what, it wears you out though. You better be in good shape, which is probably another area where there can be room for improvement in all teams, I think, is their physical, not just physicality, but their physical conditioning. And not just, running the track. It's their conditioning in game day, because some of these up-tempo teams, I'll tell you, that's tough. That's tough on a defense. The up-tempo, 7 seconds or so between plays. You're going to have to suck it up pretty good. And some of the guys have a tougher go at it than others, especially the down linemen. Nose tackles in particular, big boys, space eaters, and that's hard on them. And you can see it. You can see by about the third play of a up-tempo deal, drive, they got to come off the field. You got to get somebody else in there. So other than that, I have no point of view.
The last thing that I want to touch on, we mentioned some of the accolades. A team captain in 1975, a two-time national champion, the Rose Bowl wins, the Notre Dame wins. During looking back at your career at USC, what's your biggest point of pride? What are you most proud of in terms of the accomplishments and anything that you did as a Trojan?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I'm going to maybe take a little different point of view, because there was a lot of great, as you already pointed out, Eric, a lot of great football accomplishments. There were some hard losses too in there, and disappointments. Look, that's life, and there it is. But I will tell you how we got along as a team was extraordinary. And there was a time where we had this joke among ourselves on defense, and we would laugh. It was the brothers and the other. That was the only other out there, and we would just laugh our butts off on that one. And we would switch things up just to have some fun on the field, because I'm standing out there, I'm calling the huddle or calling the signals, and we got 5 guys and 5 guys and then one guy, and then one guy's the other. It's hilarious, And there were some times where frankly, I had to turn and kind of turn away. I was laughing my ass off so hard, and that's really not appropriate, during the game. But it was just sometimes it just struck me and them funny, and we're throwing jokes at each other, and then of course call the defense, and off we went. But it's one of those little known kind of things that the way that we truly, it's not that we look past anybody's background or where and how they got to where they were. It was not even noticed. It wasn't important. What was important is that we all worked together. It was a team. We had a common purpose and a common goal. We worked our asses off to achieve it. And all that other stuff was like whatever. Today, when I see these guys taking a knee and all that stuff, I got no use for that. I have to tell you. You can do that on your own time. That's fine. That's cool. That's it's appropriate, frankly, if people have that point of view. But the game is just more than just a playing game, and to turn it into something that is outside the boundaries of in football, men coming together to play a game, and to we keep score for a reason. There's winners and losers, and there's some great battles, and it's sport, right? And anything that takes away from that, I think, diminishes the sport, which diminishes the impact.
I appreciate the stories and kind of the look back, and again, to WeAreSC readers, a known name, and always appreciative of kind of your breakdowns of USC defensive performances, which we're going to be able to get to see this fall. Yeah. Looking forward to seeing a new defensive coordinator, and hopefully eventually, like you mentioned, a rise back to the years that you were there at USC, that kind of performance level of some of those national championship teams.
I sure would love that. And I am looking, in a weird way, this season is just, I don't know what to make of anything right now, to tell you the truth. But once we have the common denominator of, guys on the field playing a game that we understand and love, that's helpful. Let's just pray and hope Tufele comes back. I just have to say that, okay? I mean, we need that guy in the middle, I have to tell you, especially in a 3-4. So, it's not a pure, true 3-4 with a nose tackle and a zero technique, but it is a 3-4 with a nose tackle, working off the center. So Tufeli will eat that up alive. Hope he comes back. Tell him I said so.
All right, Kevin, again, thank you so much for the time. That's First and 10 with former USC captain, national champion linebacker, Kevin Bruce.
Thanks, Eric.